Hey guys, Toby Mathis here, and today we're going to go over three things that are really important. Number one, we're going to go over a bunch of different types of lawsuits and how you can make sure that they don't happen to you. And specifically, we're going to be going over an $87 fender bender that became a $3 million lawsuit. I say 3 million, it's 3 million plus, but you'll learn about that and how to make sure it doesn't happen to you. Number two, we're going to be talking about how insurance and having too much of it could actually be a bad thing. So like when is too much of a good thing a bad thing? And then we're going to hit that. And then how to take the target off your backs from these professional plaintiffs. And I couldn't think of a better person to bring in than Christina Mundy, who is I think you're the partner in charge at Messner Reeves for all their litigation, right? For defense litigation.
Yes, I'm the managing trial partner for Messner Reeves. We're a nationwide law firm.
And you guys just do defense, right?
That's correct. We defend insureds when they get sued for whether it's a car accident or premises case.
Yeah. And so I'm a guy who just tells people, keep your stuff out of the public record, try to keep the target off your back. Don't let people know what you make. And people always say, is it real? Do these lawsuits actually happen? So I said, there's nobody better that I know because you litigate these things all day long. I was just hoping you would share some of your cases with us. And the one that you and I spoke of before was that $87 fender bender. Give some folks some context of how these things happen and what they look like, and maybe like your top three cases that come to mind when you think of these things.
In normal life, we all encounter an oops moment where you might be backing out of a parking spot, you might tap someone's bumper, you get out, you apologize, and most of the time people walk away and you might write them a check for a couple $100 and they fix their car. But unfortunately, especially in places like Nevada, that bumper tap may become within 2 years a lawsuit that you're fighting. We had one case where it was an $87 bumper tap in a grocery store parking lot, and almost 2 years later, our client got sued, and the plaintiff claimed she had $600,000 approximately in medical specials for treatment she had undergone and needed millions in the future. And people run into those cases, and well, our client walked away and thought, well, there's no problem, there's no damage, didn't take pictures, didn't do anything. All of a sudden, they 2 years later get served with a summons and complaint.
And so the plaintiff in this case, the person that supposedly got hit, right? Because it was this like a Costco or Albertsons or something like that.
It was basically two people backing out of a parking spot at the same time.
So they bumped their bumpers and it hardly did any damage. We say $87 because it was $87 of damage, right?
That's right.
Yep. So we're talking about very, very low impact. But this person went and got treated for something, right? I imagine they didn't just concoct $300,000 or $600,000 of medical expenses. They're actually going out and finding somebody who says, "Yeah, I'll treat you," and make this a mountain out of a molehill. What was that like?
Well, sometimes as you can run into these cases, you have what we call professional plaintiffs. I've had cases where a plaintiff's been in 8 accidents in 7 years. And so they may still be treating from their last accident, and they make the argument essentially, well, this $87 bumper tap wouldn't normally hurt someone who was healthy, but I wasn't healthy. And that becomes the web. The other thing that happens in a lot of states like Nevada, the attorneys that represent the plaintiffs refer them to doctors who treat them on a lien. And what that means is the doctor is invested in the outcome of the case because they don't get paid until the lawsuit settles. And the doctors are able to bill sometimes 13 times more than what they would be able to bill an insurance company. So the people treating them are invested in how the lawsuit turns out.
And so you say 13 times, like there's just no rhyme or reason that they can just overbill like crazy. Do they actually do that?
They do. What could be if you went through your regular insurance and got a steroid injection in your neck, just throwing numbers out there, your insurance company might pay $700 for it. But by the time they put the surgery center and everything on top of it, it could be $15,000, $16,000 because it's a formula. The doctors don't get paid on every case. So they mark up the amount, and maybe they only get paid on 50% of the cases. Actually, do they get their money?
And so these folks are going out and just getting treated. But are these bad doctors? Because like I have a bunch of doctor clients. They're probably out here losing their mind if they're watching this, thinking, "Are you saying doctors will do this?" Are there doctors that actually do that? That's part of their practice, or is it they just they're victims as well?
There are doctors that are basically all they do is treat personal injury plaintiffs. And if you spoke to the doctors, they would say, our job is to treat the patient, and we're treating based upon the subjective complaints that they're telling us. But the prices are exorbitant, and sometimes these plaintiffs are receiving more treatment than they would receive in their normal course, whether it be an insurance carrier or a non-personal injury doctor might even treat them with.
Are the plaintiff's lawyers part of this too? Are they telling them to go get treated and perhaps maybe coaching them?
It depends on the attorney, but the attorneys are typically the ones that refer the clients to specific doctors to receive treatment.
And there's folks, I believe that here in our backyard, I'm in Las Vegas, as are you, where there was people that got reprimanded or actually got busted because they were running they were running these things where they were doing it all together, very, very formulaic to boost claims. Is that accurate?
That's right. In Las Vegas, I believe it was called the medical mafia, but there were a group of individuals that I believe it was the Department of Justice investigated relating to that very thing. And the problem is you have professional plaintiffs that are working within every minor accident. And sometimes I had another case where the accident didn't even happen. The jury ultimately found that there was no accident, but my client still went through over 5 years of litigation for being sued for something they didn't even do.
They just made it up out of thin air. And why would they target somebody? Like, is this something where they're actually going after somebody, or was it just, was there at least some semblance like, hey, you were in the same parking lot and I got your license plate and said you did it, or like what actually happened there?
Sometimes it's it was a premise case where a gentleman fell and he swore that my client who drove by him hit him. There was no physical evidence that he'd ever been hit, and the jury ultimately determined that. But the thing that I think the general public doesn't realize is you see court cases on TV, on shows like Judge Judy, and you think, oh, well, it's over in a couple months. The reality, it's not. I just finished a trial a few weeks ago, and the incident happened in November of 2019. And so my client's been in litigation all of that time. And I think people don't understand, even if your insurance company is providing a defense, the stress that people go under when you're being sued, and potentially you're being sued for more money that you even have, whether it's insurance limits or anything else.
So, can you give another example of like how this plays out in real life? I know you litigate all the time, but I believe there was a case. The gentleman ended up losing his job because the lawsuit was taking up so much time. Is that a reality that you see?
It is a reality. And in that case, that was one where there was a question whether there was ever even contact between the vehicles. And in that case, because that plaintiff, that particular plaintiff had been in 7 or 8 accidents, the damages were coming right out of the gate at the time the lawsuit was filed, were alleged to be over $2 million. And because of that, my client's insurance rates for his small business went from a couple $100s a month to almost $2,000 a month. And he simply couldn't afford it. He had to let his business go because of the resulting rate increase. And ultimately, that plaintiff did not prevail, didn't get what they had asked for. But it's the collateral damage that happens to people in the in-between.
What like is there data of how many of these accidents actually become claims that get litigated or get where there's lawyers involved? And I mean, I see them all over the place in this town. Everywhere I go, if I'm down in Texas, there's a guy like the Hammer. And then here we got some knucklehead that's like, we win. There's all these people up there on the billboards that are telling you how real is this? Like, how prevalent is it? How many of these cases out of 100 how many of them are going to end up with a lawyer on it trying to make it into a bigger claim than it is?
I think right now the general public is starting to realize how many do. Over the last 6 months, probably every couple of weeks, there's an article in the paper about another insurance company who's getting approval to raise their rates. And there was one that just came out. It's a 30% increase in Clark County, Nevada. And some of the statistics say that as many as 90% of car accidents in Clark County end in a bodily injury claim.
Whoa. Let's 90%. So like, we'll get to how you stop it in a minute, but I want to go back to the $87 one. That's in the back of my head. How did that get to be? So it was $3 million. What ended up happening in that case?
That case, that particular case ended where the plaintiff got very little. The jury ultimately found that it was an exacerbation, but for a couple week period where, a pre-existing condition got a little worse for a couple weeks, but it didn't end in that. I had another one of those parking lot cases that I tried in April, and it ended in a defense verdict. The jury ultimately rejected all of the damages and actually found the plaintiff that was suing, 40% comparatively negligent because they had essentially parked in a blind spot behind my client.
Now, what is the ramification to, even if you win? So I know that you win a bunch of these cases because you're just a really good defense lawyer.
Yeah.
But what is the cost to the plaintiff? So if you end up getting targeted in one of these things, no fault of your own, right? Hey, you're out there just driving, you have a little fender bender, and you get a professional plaintiff that just decides they're going to make their fortune on you, and you win. What is the actual cost to that individual? Is it just increased premiums? Does it take, is this something that takes a year, 2 years? What is the cost?
So when you look at the cost to the defendant, the person that's being sued, typically they'll see some type of premium increase. But the biggest thing is the stress of being sued, because if they don't have enough insurance limits, then they're worried about their own personal assets and the stress of, am I going to lose my house? Am I going to be able to send my kid to college? You're living in the lawsuit. You're being deposed. You're having parts of your life gone through with a fine-tooth comb. The plaintiffs that sue have very little risk. Yes, under the law, when I win a case for my client is automatically entitled to recover their cost. But the reality is, when you look, I had a recent case where by the time the attorney's fees and costs were added up, the court awards, it was almost $300,000. The reality is the average, what I would call a professional plaintiff, they don't have any assets to recover that money from. So there's very little low side, downside for a plaintiff to file the lawsuit, because when they go see the attorney, they sign a contingency fee agreement. They're not writing any check out of their pocket. The medical treatment that they're getting from the doctors, they're done on a lien. And, as you and I have talked about, the doctor's contract says, yes, I can recover it. But again, you can't get money from someone that doesn't potentially have it.
So they need to have the lawsuit actually end up in something where that person is getting paid for them to get paid anything back.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, shifting over, because we were talking a lot about automobile cases, but there's also premises. And I know you worked for a major commercial property owner. And I get this all the time where people are like, oh, it doesn't really happen. The lawsuits, you're exaggerating and things like this. But with some of these, like you had a big one. Was this once in a while, like once a week, once a year? Or are we talking about hundreds of cases that happen like all the time where you're just like, you got to be kidding me. These people are suing constantly. Where is it in the whole scheme of things?
Honestly, the bigger the property, the more claims that you're going to have. And you're going to have run-of-the-mill claims from someone claiming that they slipped and fell on something, to suing because another guest may have injured them. And it all ties back to, they filed the lawsuit against who they believe might have the money. So if you and I are in a shopping center and you're horseplaying with someone and you knock me over, yeah, I have the right to sue you, Toby. But the reality is I'm going to sue the shopping center owner who has insurance and who has significant more assets. And then I might sue the security company who's supposed to be driving through the shopping center.
And how often does this actually happen? Is this hundreds of cases, thousands? Is this
There,
once in a while?
it happens a significant amount. And unfortunately, the bigger the property, the more they are as the target. If you had, a tiny mom and pop shopping center, you might not have as many claims, but you put a shopping center or you put a big hotel in and you're going to become a target.
You just can't help it. So let's shift gears then. So if I am somebody like you're somebody who's listening out here, and a lot of times they say, "Oh, don't worry about it. Just have insurance. That's going to be enough." Number one, is that your experience? Say this is good enough, and two, is there such thing as too much of a good thing? Like, don't have too much insurance.
Well, obviously, we always tell people that they need to work with their tax planning professionals and the people that advise them on their assets and how they're held. But if you have too much insurance, it can make you a target. And the example I can give you is if somebody gets in a car accident with another party, and let's say, Toby, you have the minimum limit of policy in Nevada, which is 25,000, 50,000. A plaintiff might get a little bit of treatment, 10 or 12,000, and then the doctors on a lien aren't going to continue to treat them because there's not a method to recover it because there's that small insurance policy. But you get in an accident and I find out, Toby, you have $10 million worth of insurance. And for, in a case where you have a plaintiff that's being, untruthful, there's a lot more runway for them to recover through that insurance.
And so do they overtreat? Is that basically what you're saying, is that, hey, if there's $10 million of insurance, they're going to try to work up against it?
And that's what happens. The majority of the cases I try are highly disputed cases where either the accident didn't happen or the injuries couldn't have been caused by the accident. There are legitimate accidents that happen where people are legitimately hurt. And those cases don't usually have to wind their way through the system. They usually will get resolved. But when you encounter somebody who's not honest, then that additional insurance provides the opportunity where they can get additional lien treatment.
So what do you tell people? Like, what's the right amount of insurance for the most part?
It honestly all depends on what someone has and how their assets are done. I personally, you have a primary policy, and then we always advise people to have an umbrella policy that covers your, anything happens at your house or your car. But we tell people work with your insurance broker and work with your CPA to understand how to protect yourself. But you don't. It used to be people thought, well, I need the biggest umbrella. And that may not be the best thing.
Is $1 million good? 2 million, 10 million?
It depends on someone's individual, but if you have, an underlying policy of 200 to 500, the average person with a $1 or $2 million policy is probably okay.
Yeah, and that's having an umbrella. So you have your regular policy, has a primary coverage, keep it somewhat low, 500,000, then have the umbrella, because otherwise you might be just inviting a big problem. And that makes sense, right? A lot of people, I've heard people say, don't have insurance because you're inviting issues. And I'm like, then they're just going to take all your stuff if you do have an accident. And like you said, there's legitimate claims out there. Now you get to see a lot of these kind of fraud rings, the professional plaintiffs. I've seen a million of them. We know of one where they were staging accidents down in Louisiana, right? So like, there's people that do this for a living. Believe it or not, folks out there, like, there's people that literally make their living filing lawsuits and concocting stuff, and they run these elaborate schemes. A lot of times they get busted, but you might be a victim in the meantime. Which brings us to last thing: how do you keep that target off your back? How do you protect yourself against these folks?
The one thing that I was, for people that are in our age group, people work on their word. You shake your hand, you say, I'm sorry, and can I write you a check? Can I take care of the damage? Unfortunately, I've seen too much in my industry. No good deed goes unpunished. And so I tell my clients that if there's an incident or even an alleged incident, someone yells to you, "You just hit my car." Number one, do not apologize. It's a natural inclination to say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Don't apologize. Get out of the vehicle, try to identify what's going on, take photos, sometimes take video if there's a situation going on. We had one client who reported that the person she was in the incident with said, "I'm sorry to do this to you, but this is my payday." And so take photographs, record the video. If you're on a public street, call 311, ask to have the police come out and document it. And then I always tell clients, send yourself an email, attach the photos to it, put all the details that you can remember. We've had incidents that come up where there was only one person involved in the accident at the scene, but suddenly when the lawsuit comes up, they claim there was another person in the car. So everything that you can remember, how many people were in the car, what did people say, was everyone okay, did someone mention, "Oh, I just had a back surgery," those kind of details. And I tell people to email them to themselves, because the number of times that I've had clients say, "Oh, I got rid of that phone," or "My iCloud crashed," and then they don't have that evidence. So document, take photographs, assume you're going to be sued. And I also tell clients to report it to your insurance company, report anything to your insurance broker. So there's a record, because in Nevada, you have 2 years to file a lawsuit. So you walk away from an Albertsons parking lot and say, "Everything's fine. That person, is going to call me about the bumper tap." And 2 years later, you're, walking, home from work, and a process server serves you and you say, "What happened?"
I've actually had that happen to multiple clients. Client was in a company van, what are those, going to the bank. They were going through a drive-through, and they looked down, and they got distracted, and they took their foot off the brake, and their car just rolled into the car in front of them. And they ended up becoming friends with the person that was in the car. That they had a child, and they were like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I bumped you," and they're like, "Oh, there's not even any damage. Don't worry about everything else." They ended up doing some play dates and stuff, and the gal saw their house. And I kid you not, 2 years almost to the day, my client got served. And the gal was not very apologetic about it. But what she had done is she saw the house, she saw how they lived, and thought, payday. Some lawyer takes it and says, "Oh, here's what you do." Started a treatment program that really wasn't warranted. And of course, sued the business, sued the individual, made a mess. And eventually the gal, the plaintiff, admitted, "I saw what you had and I wanted some of that." But that was after the settlement, right? And they got the check, and everybody says, "Oh, it's the insurance paid for it." No, we all pay for it, right? And the client got jacked up on the premiums for their business. And I don't believe the business survived, if my recollection is correct. Those added costs and that added time of getting drugged through that process is what was a great undoing. So you gave us some ideas of what you can do. I want to direct you to professionals specifically. Like, what would you say to a doctor or somebody who's got some serious assets? They get into an accident. What are things that they should never say? What are some things that they can do to make sure that that person doesn't go and start digging into what they might own? Is there anything there that you can offer us?
Well, they can use companies like yours long before the accident happens to make sure that they all of their properties are in trust and everything is protected. I always advise clients to not have their names in the public record. You can go online and now through a lot of the laws that have been passed to have your data removed from data brokers. And at the scene of an accident, I would never say to someone, "Oh, I'm a lawyer," or "Oh, I'm a doctor." And because that just opens you up. Because what people don't realize is when an accident happens, an attorney considering taking the case on behalf of a plaintiff, they typically do asset searches on the plaintiff or on the potential defendant. And they go through to see what they may have. And then under almost every state's law, they're entitled to find out what your insurance limits are. They, in Nevada, even if a lawsuit has not been filed, if they provide releases to get the plaintiff's records, then you have to give them what the insurance limits are. And so they have an idea out of the gate what is the potential, and then they've already run you through the system to find out what you may own.
Yeah. Have you seen anybody who just got kind of like any cases that popped to mind where someone was just shook down because of what they had?
Yeah, I had a client who was a business owner in town and owned several different businesses. And the vehicle he was driving was actually in a business name. And they figured out who he was, and they sued him personally, even though there was no legal basis for. Ultimately, we were able to get as an individual dismissed, but he was sued because they went and they did their research.
So keep your name out of the public record. Make sure that if you do have success, that you're making it very hard to dig. There's certain things you can't do, right? There's no way I can't make myself disappear. If I get into a little car accident, I can't make myself disappear. If you have kids, when your kids gets into the accident, you can't make yourself disappear. But you got to do is make sure that you're not an easy target, so that somebody doesn't just decide that their lottery winning is you. It makes me sad when you said that gal said, hey, this is my payday. There's a lot of people who have that perception. If somebody hits them, it's their good fortune, right? It's like, oh, this is great. I can actually get paid now. And and it's at somebody else's expense. We just don't want that. Any other cases that pop to mind where you're like, geez, Louise, I cannot believe I'm having to defend this?
No, I recently just finished a case, and the clients came by my office after we successfully finished it for them, and I had never met the client's wife, and she hugged me and she said, for the first time in 5.5 years, I was able to get a good night's sleep. They're a couple that were in their early 60s, and she said, we're trying to figure out, are we going to have to get jobs again? Are we going to have to work? Are we going to be able to, travel and see our grandchildren? What is our future going to look like? And that's a really sad statement when someone at that point in their life who's worked really hard and have always done the right thing. And in that case, that particular client had been a professional driver for 20 years, had driven on the Las Vegas roads for 20 years, and had only been in this one alleged accident. And you had a plaintiff who had been in almost, 10 accidents. And you just look at it from a statistical perspective. But unfortunately, my poor client was chosen that day to be a target.
Yep. And the emotional, I always call it the 3 a.m.s. You wake up at 3 a.m. and you think of all the Perry Mason stuff you're going to do. Or if you're just you might just be the punching bag, and you might just be thinking about all the things you could lose, how your life savings could go up in smokes because you got a professional plaintiff who's decided they're going to sink their teeth into you. So I guess our big takeaways, if I'm hearing you right, don't make admissions, record the heck out of things. There's certain things you can control, like don't be overinsured where someone just decides that this is great. They have so much insurance to work with here that they can just go nuts on you. And make sure that you don't have everything in your own name. And if there's anything I'm missing, please add it in. But those are my big takeaways. And if somebody's watching this, maybe that would be their takeaway too.
No, you're exactly right. And it's our instinct as human beings to be apologetic, to be sorry, to make admissions. And the reality is I've never seen it come back where it was the right thing to do.
All right. Great advice from a defense attorney who does this stuff day in and day out. Like, subscribe. And if you ever hear somebody says, oh, this stuff never happens, share this video with them. Just go ahead. And if you know of any cases or you want to add your case, put it in the comments below. We love to hear the stories, not because we like to hear bad things that happen to folks, but because a little bit of awareness might prevent somebody from becoming a victim of one of these professional plaintiffs. It might make sure that they can keep themselves out of a bad situation. So hopefully this is helpful. Thanks, guys.